GM to the GM. Welcome everyone to the Open Metaverse show on the Defiant News. I'm Robin Schmidt, the head of video and multimedia at the Defiant, and alongside me, as always, is Vector Meldrew, top NFT artist and general all-round good blue human. How are you, Vec?
Good, man. Good. As I was saying, things are getting weirder. They're accelerating and they're getting more surreal. I think it's a sign of the singularity.
Do you know what? We said GM. We should really be calling you VM. Should we not?
I think you should have a jingle for that as well. That'd be cool.
Jesus.
Vector.
Yes, we do have a. Well, we also have a joker on the channel, JMO. We're talking about ethics in the metaverse, and he said, "Ethics, more like BT6." Nice one. Love
the comment voice.
I know, right? I was doing some voiceover work for I was actually auditioning for a part in a cartoon, believe it or not, and I had to do like a vocal read for this cartoon, and like I had no idea what the guy was looking for. This is like some dude in Hollywood. He's actually quite a well-known actor. He was looking for voice artists, so I just started improvising all sorts of stuff, and it was amazing how quickly I resorted to both racist, gangster, and a whole bunch of other just horrible cliches. I was like, dude, shut up.
Demons just come out.
I became like a ghetto hoodlum from like an Ice Cube movie from the 90s. I don't know what that means, but it wasn't good.
Wow, that's like Jim Carrey in The Mask, all these different things come out.
It's good fun though. It's good, but like trying to find a voice for a character is really good fun. And I think this is actually pertinent to what we're talking about today. Like for you, you're perfectly comfortable using your own voice being this character. But like I was finding when we were doing those deep face live things a couple of weeks back, I needed to change when the face changed. I couldn't be myself and have like Jim Carrey's face. I needed to change and have like a different voice or different physical actions. And I do wonder like how much when we put on these avatars in the metaverse, how much of ourselves get subsumed into the role of the character so that you're just playing parts all day long. And it's this kind of idea of fractal identity and fractal consumerism that we just put on these masks. I am this thing today, and then I'll be this other thing tomorrow, and maybe in the afternoon I'll be something else. It's quite profound in a weird way.
It's weird. Don't worry, I'm speaking to my therapist about it at the moment.
Sounds good. Is your therapist also a virtual?
No, she's real. She's real.
It's going to be weird. Like in the future, we're like, no, she's real.
Yeah, boring.
Everyone just hush down. It's like when there's a copper in the room, you just go, no, he's a policeman. No, she's real. Ooh, matron, teachers in the room. You know what I mean? It's like being real would be like ooh.
Yeah,
like
it's going to get a bit icky at some point.
Dude, it already is. It's so icky already. So listen, let's talk about something that isn't icky. Bottles for Ukraine. This is a collection of exclusive one-of-one editions by 34 different artists from around the globe who have decided to come together and create specific artworks around the idea of a baby's milk bottle. And it's for UNICEF, and it's designed to just raise money for the plight of, I think it's some horrible numbers, like 7.5 million children have been displaced in the Ukraine. And the humanitarian cost of this war, as it goes on longer and longer, is mounting daily, and it's utterly terrifying. So we've got a little teaser here. I'm just going to hog the screen for a second so people can see it. So this is the Bottle for Ukraine teaser. Sorry, JMO, I'm going to get rid of you. And this is artists like Alan Bolton, Amy Kilner, Andy Needham, Brian Henry. We've got Dave Gamers. Some of the other ones that I saw down here, Goldweird. We had Jonathan Winbush. The Winbush!
Winbush, what up?
Whoop. If you know, you know. If you don't know, well then, shame on you. And of course, down the bottom, who do we find but Vector Meldrew? How did you get involved in this one?
Through Perry, basically. Perry Cooper, respected artist, OG crypto art legend, invited me to do a bottle. And I'd want to do something for Ukraine for a while, but I hadn't found the right project. And this one just seemed like great because, it goes through Nifty, starts tomorrow. It's all one-on-ones. It's also been displayed in the Crypt Gallery in Hollywood, LA, which is a notable IRL gallery in Hollywood. So yeah, there's a lot of people on there, and there's a lot of platforms on there. So really exciting.
Yeah, and the artwork themselves, let's be honest, they're actually pretty dope. I was really impressed with just the level of kind of variety, but also it feels really cohesive. It's the same idea, it's the same message, but just interpreted through the eyes of all of these different artists in a really, like, you can see everyone's stepped up, apart from you, obviously, to to do something worthy of it. And I got to give a shout out to Andy Needham, who kind of nudged me and said, dude, can you give this a shout? So this is dropping on Nifty Gateway. There isn't actually a microsite for Nifty Gateway just yet. But I think something you just said there as well was you wanted to do something for Ukraine. But why? What is it that's been provoking you into feeling like you needed to do something?
Well, the global situation, I guess, that has unfolded over the past few weeks. And, when it happened, I think everyone kind of stopped. But then I think as a reaction to that, it's quite a natural thing to carry on. But obviously it's still happening in a different part of the world. So there was just still a need within me personally. Once I'd finished a bunch of stuff, I was like, I definitely want to do something for this. So it's important, I think, as an artist, and especially in an ecosystem with so much, money flying around and easy transactions. I think it's a good base to do something like this from.
Yeah, totally. We went and met a film producer, Ukrainian film producer, who's based in Holland at the moment, but she has converted all of her skill set, which is maneuvering people around, working extremely long hours, getting stuff from A to B, into getting essential supplies from where they are, which could be anywhere in the world, to the front line in the Ukraine, but specifically to the Territorial Army, which is the volunteer force. So a huge number of soldiers in the Ukraine were never trained as soldiers. They had kind of a week to get ready. They were in a uniform. They had a helmet, maybe, but then there was a bunch of stuff they didn't have. And the army, the trained forces are getting the bulk of the tactical supplies. But there's a bunch of other stuff like thermal images, flat jackets, these kind of things that they need, but they can't get them. So she's raising money. But you know what the fucked up thing is? She can get commitments of supplies. She can probably get the money to buy them, but she can't get the money to the right place to ensure that the sale goes through. And so the thing that was missing in the middle is crypto. It's so fucked up. So they can send money to someone in Asia. That person can then convert it to crypto, send it to Poland, and that cross-border transaction is what makes the entire thing possible at speed. And I see tons of goodwill and tons of, good sentiment. But what she said to me was like, don't send us your thoughts. Don't send us your prayers. We don't give a fuck. Do something if you can help. Otherwise, shut up, because I don't have time to go, oh, yeah, no, well, thank you so much. It's like, no, I've got lives to save. It was sobering in the extreme. And so we came out of that going like, well, how can we help? So one of the things we've been doing is making a film, but also like looking at ways in which we can shine a more of a light on what she's doing. Because at the end of the day, like, there's a fuckload of people dying, like a lot, like really a lot of people dying on both sides in a war that is so incomprehensibly stupid and unnecessary and seemingly played out in the mind of someone who, I don't know, it makes no fucking sense. So you're absolutely right. When you say you needed to do something, I completely applaud it. And the trouble I have with all these things is like large charity organizations have so much red tape and administration that is very difficult to really understand where your money is going and what it's doing. But with someone like Rada, who we covered, you can see exactly what she's doing. I mean, she showed me her spreadsheet with all of the supplies that she's trying to acquire for people. She gets requests. She gets like 1,000 messages an hour from people saying, can you help? My son is stuck here. Can you get him a vest or a helmet? It's fucking real. And like, you just don't realize how genuinely real it is. And the thing that really sucks is this has been going on in Syria and in Libya and in Lebanon and all over the fucking world for so long, and we just ignored it. We just said no. So anyway, I applaud you for doing this. I will definitely be trying to pick up some of these and bidding and trying to at least make sure some money goes to the right place. But anyway, yeah, nice work, and thanks again to Perry and to Andy Needham for for sending this our way. So that's the Bottles to Ukraine. It's going to be dropping on Nifty Gateway, I believe, tomorrow. Here's the trailer once again. Check out the art on these because it's pretty dope. And I will be proud to be an owner of one of these. And like you said, I think there's so much money sloshing around this space. Even a fraction of it, like a tiny fraction of it, could do so much good. Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting because, you know, it's not what people tune in for. But still, there you go.
Yeah.
Next up, what should we look at? Oh, the M by Proto. Let me add this to the stream. Here we go. Have you seen this?
I don't believe I have. Oh no, I have. Did we go through this last time?
I don't know, but I wanted to see it again. World's first tabletop holographic communication. We did. Yeah. We stated it. I went back and looked at this and tried to find some redeeming qualities of it, and I still couldn't.
Wow.
I still couldn't.
But I still want to know what the technology is inside this, because it's just purely compositing. It's just a mock-up. Like, what makes it holographic? Because there's only a few different types of holographic things possible at the moment. So
what's lovely here is that they got a CES Innovation Award. They were 2022 honoree. It's like gonorrhea, but like it's like you did a thing. Well done. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to the CES, like the consumer whatever it is show. They'll give an award for anything.
Yeah, I've got one.
I've
probably got one.
Proof in point. They'll
give
an award for anything. And there's literally like a category for best use of wiring in a plug socket. You know, it's like it's crazy shit. Next one I wanted to look at was a new dimension of reality. This is Wilder World. And like, I don't know if you can see the problem immediately with this page. Wilder World is an immersive 5D metaverse built on Ethereum, Unreal Engine 5, and 0. 5D? What is that exactly?
This how many dimensions? I mean, should there be?
Time, my friend. It's time. Or is time the fourth dimension? I don't even know anymore. Like, how do we get to 5 dimensions?
I think it's smell as well. You can smell stuff.
Yes, Rafik Anadol was talking about that with something he's cooking up, Smell-O-Vision.
Smell-O-Vision.
They invented Smell-O-Vision like a really long time ago. You know, like so many of the things that are like innovations, they were cooked up like 60, 70 years ago, and they realized that they were just so stupid and so hard to bring to market. They're like, nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something sensible like a radio. And then they did that. So this is Wilder World. Have you come across Wilder World at all?
I haven't. Go on, give me the pitch. What's the
pitch?
Look,
I mean, this is the pitch. You're watching it right now. This is the trailer. It has this kind of dark tower thing to it. I mean, it's a video game basically, but it's a video game that is a metaverse. And I think it's wise to exercise a decent amount of skepticism when it comes to metaverses. However, I do have it on good authority that the team behind this are incredibly capable, for whatever that means. And the trailer looks fantastic. But then, you know, if you've dabbled around in Unreal Engine, you know that it's quite possible to make very gorgeous stuff in Unreal Engine. That does not mean it will be a great metaverse experience or a great game. But what do we have here? We've got wheels. So these are race vehicles. We've got kicks. These are shoes, believe it or not. We've got cribs, somewhere to hang your hat. Land.
There's land.
Guilds, there's crafts.
Land. And
there's beasts. I mean, every single touch point of this is very nice to look at. I mean, genuinely, really, really nice to look at. I'm being kind of a bit of a dick about it, but this is a team that I desperately would love to talk to and find out what they've got cooking, because I think of all the sort of fleshed out three-dimensional metaverses I've seen, this one looks the nicest. But, you know, like with all of these things, a metaverse experience is about footprint. It's about how many people you can get in there. And so there's these like fleshed out, super photorealistic, beautiful, gorgeously designed metaverses. And then we have these very, very simple, kind of easy to access, easy to use ones like cryptovoxels. Funnily enough, we'll be talking about hyper-real experiences with our big guest, Tom Graham from Metaphysic, in a moment. But also, there's this piece from Meta's Nicola Mendelsohn in Vogue, where she's talking about direct to avatar, which will become the new direct to consumer. So fashion is all about taking technology and make it really work for you to drive sales. But I mean, like, have you seen any of the Meta stuff? Have you seen like the terrifying, Horizon Worlds demo they did, or at least the conversation they did.
You
Have you
posted
seen-
that on Twitter. Yeah, I watched it the other day. It seemed Mark Zuckerberg definitely said "we are early" at least 5 times. So he's got the catchphrases.
Yeah, he does. He does. I think it's here. Here we go. Testing new tools
That's
for
it.
Horizon Worlds creators to earn money. I mean, what struck you about this? What were the things that made you kind of go, huh?
Well, I mean, this is their idea of a metaverse, though. It's a meeting room, basically. Like this is their most their big pitch, right?
Yeah. So, do you have an Oculus or anything like that? Have you used one of those?
No, I don't yet. I'm scared to get into it, but
No, don't be scared. It's fantastic. The Oculus is really cool. Genuinely, once you kind of have the feeling of not being tethered to a computer and you just have this thing, it's very. I mean, it's not the best resolution thing, but it's relatively cheap. I love the Oculus. I think it's really good fun. But this looks like crap, to be honest with you. I remember like the N65.
N64.
N64, yeah. Did you ever play that one? Like Pilot Wings on the N64.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what this reminds me of. And like there's so much about this that is it just feels so kind of Windows.
Why is Wendy's in there? Why does Wendy's have to be there?
Oh, you know, it's for the man on the street and the woman on the street. But anyway, there's this horribly cringeworthy kind of. I mean, I genuinely don't know what this is floating around. Like, what? Like my idea of a metaverse and what a metaverse can be is not this. But you know, anyway, I was kind of shocked by it and appalled by it in equal measure. One last thing I wanted to show you was this. This is Punk 6529. Are you aware of the Punk?
Yeah. I've read most of the mega threads. That was a very long thread.
It's a monster thread. I mean, he even says if you're new to long tree storms, you have to click show replies. This is a massive, massive thread by Punk 6529, who, if we look at his stats, it's one of probably the most prominent metaverse and NFT collector influencers around at the moment. Definitely someone to follow. Very forthright and very clear in what he, she, they, it articulates. But what was interesting is clearly unsatisfied by what he had found in the market and decided to build something for him themselves. And there's a little trailer of what it is. This is OM. Spoiler, it stands for Open Metaverse. And so you can see kind of the idea of what this is. Massive, very simple 3D environments that can house digital art. And we will go and play one in a second. But it's the on cyber experience just built out a little bit. And you can go and join the alpha of that and sign up for a space in this environment. I don't really know what it's going to be and how it's going to be any different from anything else. Really, it boils down to philosophy. Do you want something that's open and not controlled by a massive Web2 conglomerate? Or do you want something that is simple and easy to use? I honestly don't know. It's getting so fragmented now. But here we can go and have a look at the museum district. And this is the alpha version of the first district of OM. So there's a good chance to just kind of jump in and have a look around. So this is, well, I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's obviously an early prototype, isn't it? So,
yes.
Hard, I mean, it's hard to judge it based on these visuals, but I mean, I definitely know people have been going in there having fun. But in terms of the philosophy and the goal, which is to be more of an open, decentralized metaverse, I like his approach because it seems to be about if you kind of pull together in a community and you can say maybe get a community of 100,000 people, so a few communities could pool resources, then you can kind of cordon off your own area. So if a few different people do that, then you'll have all these micro communities within this. So it seems like that's how he makes it more decentralized, essentially.
Yes. So I think that there's so many different approaches to this, one of which is I am Facebook and I have gazillions of users, and I will then convert them through a process of basically proselytization into understanding that hardware is going to be the interface to the richest metaverse experience. And then I'm going to sell people that hardware, and they're going to build experiences that can only be served up on that hardware. And then you're in. And that's just a horrifying prospect. Or you have this community first version of it, where you build a community first and you build it around an idea, and then that community kind of builds its own materials and spaces and games and everything else. And that's kind of like Roblox, I guess, in a sense. And Roblox is probably the model that most metaverses like Sandbox, Decentraland, everything else look to figure out, to try and, you know, build a kind of more wholesome, holistic version of the metaverse. But I mean, there's not a huge amount to look at yet. And this, as kind of interesting as it is, isn't that interesting. We've got some Fidendas over there. I'm not sure what message that's sending, but yeah. So that's that. I think we should go to a little sponsor break, and when we come back, we will have Tom Graham of Metaphysic and a little bit about Metaphysic. This is the Metaphysic website. Metaphysic are building tools and systems to allow users to create content using synthetic media, using deepfakes, but that's really just the beginning of it. But fundamentally, it's about using AI and then moving into what will be a hyper-real metaverse. And it's like the most scaled up, most futuristic version of the metaverse. And we have Tom Graham, CEO and founder of Metaphysic, ready to join us just after this message from our sponsors.
We left Earth and settled to Cosmos. Our greatest accomplishment became our downfall. Our struggle for freedom would last 9 decades. Warriors emerged and made the ultimate sacrifice. In the final battle at Mu 36, we achieved victory, but it would be centuries before we would know the cost. Learn our story. This is only the beginning.
Oh, dramatic stuff. Welcome to the stream, Tom Graham. How are you, sir?
Hey, great to meet you.
Good to meet you too. For those who don't know, can you give us a little bit of an overview of your company, Metaphysic, and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so basically we make technology AI to create hyperreal synthetic media. And so the synthetic part is where the content is kind of created by the AI rather than, say, the programs used in CGI or animation, something like that. And the hyperreal part is that it looks exactly like it was shot with a camera in real life, not like a game, not like kind of uncanny valley CGI, that kind of thing. So a good example is we created Deep Tom Cruise on TikTok, which you guys might be familiar with. You know, the really realistic Tom Cruise things.
I'm gonna bring it up, and we're gonna have a little look at Deep Tom Cruise.
You know, I do all my own stunts, obviously. I also do my own music. I've got a sweet spot for a couple of artists, and people are surprised that I'm a big Dave Matthews guy.
That's amazing.
So that's the Deep Tom Cruise, and there's a bunch of them. So why don't you talk us through what that is and how you've actually done it?
Yeah, so basically that's a performance by an actor called Miles Fisher, and on top of that, we've used AI models to kind of automatically stitch Tom Cruise's face on top. But it looks crazy realistic, like it was shot with a camera, because of the sophistication of that set of algorithms, how big and well trained that model is, and then a bunch of proprietary tools and skills that can bring all of that together to make something that is kind of like it jumps over the uncanny valley. It looks real. And Deep Tom Cruise, you know, hundreds of millions of people thought that it was real to begin with before they realized it really wasn't.
So Vector, you and I have messed around with this, and you know that I have some skills, shape-shifting skills, and I can become Tom Cruise if I want to, just like that.
Great. Yeah. Awesome.
Scary.
It's scary, right? It's scary.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to jump on the sofa and just become like madly in love with Katie Holmes, you know. Is that wild?
About the right age bracket in that model by the look of it. Yeah. Indeed.
So you will be familiar with this. I'm running Deepface Live, and there's a it's called Tim Chris. There's a Tim Chris model in there that allows me to do a facsimile of Tom Cruise in real time. We've used this on the stream before, but we're always looking to explore these different technologies and how they're they're quite confrontational. I think that's probably the right way to express it. And I think there's quite a lot about what your company's doing and the technology that you're developing that makes people uneasy. And I know this is a question you get asked a lot, and I wonder if you can kind of give us your thoughts on where the line is, if there is a line for this.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the Chris in Tim Chris refers to Chris Ume, my co-founder. So that's where I think that pre-trained model came from. Around the uneasiness, absolutely. What we're doing really as we build out these technologies to allow anybody to create their own hyperreal synthetic version of themselves, which you could then play and be anywhere in the metaverse inside content created by any third-party platform. We're rebuilding humanity into the digital world on a level. And so there is a lot there that we have to be careful of. We have to be deliberate and responsible in how we roll that out, because if you can recreate a version of somebody that says and does something outside of the direct control of that person, you have a third-party algorithm company creating the hyperreal version of that person. You run into a bunch of ethical dilemmas in how you roll out that technology in order to prevent malicious actors from doing something bad with it, making you do or say something that you're not comfortable with or that causes some kind of other harm. And, obvious. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on. I think it's good to hear what you have to say about this, because I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. It's just, it's inevitable. So how do we navigate it?
Yeah. So you could imagine, political disinformation, animating anybody to perpetrate some kind of fraud, deepfake pornography, and without consent using somebody's face on top of a particular performance. All of these things can render harm at a societal level, or deeply personal contextual harm that is very, very hard to moderate for. So there is no real solve for this on many levels, apart from the following, which require like a whole bunch of work. So generally raising awareness among everybody that media can be manipulated in some way, and that maybe we should take a beat before we tweet that out or become outraged, etc. So inoculating against the virality, and potentially limiting some of that harm. Really, the second one, really deliberate rollout of these technologies by people who create them in a way that helps create like a content moderation layer. So that's something that we think about a lot. Then legislators, rulemakers, policymakers around the world, really identifying some of the risks and some of the harms and some of the potential offenses that come with this kind of new technology, and creating positive pathways for people to address those quickly. So that is another way in which we can kind of like move against some of these bad actors as they pop up. And then there are lots of people working on detection, trying to detect if something has been manipulated in some way. And that is, all of those things are kind of a matrix of positive steps that we can all make, up and down, from policymakers all the way down to consumers, in order to address what is a coming set of technologies, which will kind of dominate how we consume the internet in the future, I think.
Vector, you must have questions. I'd like to let you have a moment to interrogate Tom before I jump back in.
I'm scared. I'm still scared. These things are getting so realistic, and at this particular time when everyone's so worried about authenticity, especially online, it's like a powerful weapon in many ways, isn't it? It's in the wrong hands, it could do some extreme, there could be extreme effects. But so I guess, are there a lot of ways also you see it being used quite positively as well? Because obviously the negative, the dystopian and the science fiction kind of makes our minds run wild. But what are the kind of positive use cases?
Yeah, so we're talking about, I guess, a set of technologies, AI algorithms, which are used to create some kind of content, original content, fully synthetic, or some kind of effect on top of existing content. And actually, we see and use these kinds of things all the time. So many Instagram filters, use a similar subset of technologies to deliver filters, face swaps. We don't see much kind of consumer stuff at the grade of DFL Live, right, for this Tom Cruise face swap in Live. That's really at the cutting edge. But then there are lots of apps like Wombo or Reface, where a lot of synthetic media is generated and creates a lot of entertainment, meme, joy, irreverent content. So if you were to weigh up all of the content that is created by these kinds of algorithms and this technology, the malicious, harmful stuff is a very, very small subsection. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't really actively address the harms and how to mitigate those going forward. As a society, we've been kind of dealing with progressions in media technology for a really long time, right? So 100 years ago, there was the camera, and suddenly we could make a photorealistic representation of something and distribute that to the masses. And that was deeply threatening to a group of people who controlled the newspapers, because they used to just be able to tell people what was true. And now here's a photograph. We did the same thing through the 90s with Photoshop. People were deeply concerned about the ability to change a photograph and what impact would that have on society. Ultimately, I think in terms of artificial beauty standards and, self-esteem issues among young people brought to us by Instagram, some of these things have had a big lasting impact. So going forward, as we move to kind of like the next evolutionary phase of immersive hyperreal media and our ability to manipulate that at will, as a society, as people, as users, as developers of technology, as content creators, we have to really actively think hard and deliberately about how to roll it out.
Yeah, the two things that I take from this is that, one, it's inevitable and it's not new. It's been happening for a long time. And you rightly say that there is a surface layer to what most people project to the world that is highly curated and highly created in terms of how they polish up their self-image. And that is where we are right now. And equally, you can put makeup on you, the clothes you wear, they all form a part of this self-image that you project to the world. And that's actually not something to be afraid of. That's just another form of self-expression. I think that is absolutely 100% positive. The other piece of this is that we're moving from a phase where what we see with our eyes is inalienable. It is determined to be truthful. And so we're having to re-examine what we consider the truth to be. And it's entirely possible that we'll interact with something that we believe exhibits all the hallmarks of being a human being, but is in fact an AI, and is an entirely sympathetic AI that enriches and makes our lives more meaningful, but is not human. Those conversations around what we deem to be an acceptable compromise in our lives are incredibly interesting, really genuinely. And I think basically where it gets to is our perception of the world is no longer where we should position the truth. And we need to find a way to position truth elsewhere. And whether that's, you think about your fingerprint and biometric data, there's a truth to that. But of course, at some point, someone will figure out how to fake that. But it's going deeper and deeper and deeper into where can we consider truth to lie. Maybe it's at the subatomic level. But this stuff is very deep, very interesting, and really like at the core of so much of, I think, of what your company is going to have to wrestle with and be advocates for and, provocateurs for, as well as a restraining hand. The thing that really stood out about looking at what you were presenting is this word hyperreal, because that begs a question. Like, what do you mean by hyperreal?
Yeah, so this is groovy in the sense that, we started dealing with this kind of stuff in the 80s, more or less. And so we're talking about creating a version of reality that is synthetic, right? It exists. It's distinct from the reality that we see with our eyes. But let's say in the metaverse, it's kind of an exact copy or a very near copy that we can interact with. And so a group of philosophers in the 80s and the 90s around the time of the Gulf War, as that became kind of like the first televised version of war. And so in many ways, the first Gulf War in the early 90s there was more information coming from CNN and more cameras on the ground than in traditional kind of like wartime intelligence feeds. And so Jean Baudrillard conceptualized this idea that we are creating this hyper-real layer on top of reality, where the news media and the 24/7 news media coverage of the Gulf War is actually, it's definitely really the Gulf War, but it's on television, right? It's not there on the ground, it's on television. And so another version of that is kind of Google Maps, where if you overlay an ever more detailed version of the real world on top of the real world, and you keep on zooming in to the level where it is one for one in terms of reality. Google Maps is a representation of reality, not reality. But if it is a perfect overlay on top of reality, the distinction between reality and hyper-reality begins to fade away. And so what I think we'll see in the metaverse is the difference between a real experience and a hyper-real experience will become less important than the quality of that experience itself. So that's coming, I think, for the way in which we interact online.
So if you're just tuning into the show, we have Tom Graham from Metaphysic, really kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible with synthetic media using deepfake and AI to create basically a new set of tools for content generation. And like when we talk about content, what we're really talking about is entertainment here. I would love to dig into more of this. We've got another sponsor's message to send out, but we'll get into that after this.
Is your crypto sitting idle without earning you any passive income? On Nexo, you can maximize the value of your crypto in no time and earn rates of up to 17%. Their web platform and mobile app are super easy to use. You can buy crypto with cards instantly and start earning interest paid out daily. The Nexo exchange has over 300 market pairs. Every time you swap or buy crypto, you get up to 0.5% cash back that's automatically added to your wallet. If you want to finance buying a car or a trip to a faraway place, you can borrow cash by using your crypto or NFT as collateral. You don't lose your crypto, and you can get borrowing rates as low as 0% APR. Nexo has over 4 million users worldwide, and their platform is equipped with a top-quality security infrastructure designed to ensure maximum protection of assets at all times. Go to nexo.io and get started today.
Yes, sponsors messages. That's how we pay for stuff. It's you just raised a ton of money from some very notable people. They must have expressed some interest in you. We're talking Logan Paul. We're talking the Winklevosses. I mean, that shows you that you're on the right path, I think. Does it not?
Yeah, so that round was actually led by Bill Maris at Section 32. So he founded Google Ventures. And they were also the first investors in my first company about 10 years ago or so. So there's a bit of continuity there. And more or less, I think that we're talking about a set of technologies that will become the dominant infrastructure layer for how many people consume just about everything on the internet. So for people involved in kind of like internet scale investing, it's not a difficult conversation to have in terms of raising money around that kind of thing. What I mean by that is, what we think of a metaverses today is mostly colored by our experience with gaming and people who have read Snow Crash, Ready Player One, designing those kinds of game-like environments. In reality, I think that, over the next 10 years, we'll see a lot of different internet services move to have like a kind of visual content layer on top of them. So we'll be doing, a Zoom call. You were looking at Facebook Horizons, the future of work and school, all will be in immersive 3D environments, and they will have to be hyper real. That experience will have to be like that because it's impossible to scale kind of curated, interesting, relevant content that you want to actually be in to billions of people unless you go automatically from data that you collect in the real world directly into AI algorithms, directly into hyper-real versions of the world, hyper-real versions of ourselves in the metaverse. And the hyper-real part comes from the fact that the training data that we collect in the real world looks real, So that I think that many different things that we do on the internet, parent-teacher interviews, crappy banking relationship conversations with chatbots that look like hyper-real people, trying on a dress at the Gucci store. All of these things will be ultimately hyper-real experiences.
But there's also a degree to which people don't want hyperreal because they're not ready for things to be that realistic. So I mean, I'm looking at the blurb on the website. This is the any.1 website. I'm also looking at my own face, which is turned. I'm basically deep faking as a woman right now. It's horrifying. I don't quite know what to make of it. It's like, yeah.
You look beautiful.
I am slightly terrifying, but I've lost my train of thought.
You look like an anime character.
Oh.
We were talking about every anyone, which is our kind of Web3 platform that lets anybody create their own hyperreal synthetic likeness of themselves. But more importantly, as we move into this like new internet where AI algorithms create all of the content, it's the data which is the kind of the portable asset used to train those algorithms and create that content across any kind of platform or content experience. And so when it comes to thinking about who we are as people, really we should be owning and controlling our own data, our own core biometric data that makes us uniquely individual. And we shouldn't cede that and give that up to a big company or a third-party platform. We shouldn't really be sending it around the internet randomly, especially high-resolution versions of image data around our face or good quality audio recordings of our voice. So that's what anyone is set up to do.
But they're just going to get stolen anyway, aren't they? I mean, every time we try to watermark data or put, DRM on things, it just gets ripped off and we find a way around it.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like NFTs and, like, can you screenshot this JPEG kind of argument. It's not about trying to protect the data. It's about creating a positive economy where there is a easy way for you to be able to control your likeness and who you are and protect your data in the regular economy of creating content and content experiences in the internet. The same with deep fakes and synthetic media. It's difficult to control people who want to do bad things. So the best thing that we can do is create a positive economy where doing the right thing is just as easy or easier than doing it from a less ethical point of view, or a big company trying to own all of the data for all of the people around the world.
That's a big question, isn't it? That's a big question. Like, what constitutes right? I don't know if I know at this point, because I keep trying to figure out where the line is and where me, obviously being not Tom Cruise but presenting as this, I find it hard to figure out what that means exactly. You must struggle with this. I guess we have to have some thought leadership and people at least attempting to set out some best practices for these kinds of things. But yeah, it's a really tough question.
Yeah, so one of the core elements there is around consent. So if you are a company that creates kind of a hyperreal content experience, you shouldn't create a version of somebody that's hyperreal that could fool somebody, their kids or somebody without any context, without the direct consent of the person whose hyperreal likeness you're recreating and rendering into that kind of virtual environment. So that consent element is about empowering individuals to be in control of this hyperreal version of themselves in the same way that we're in control of our physical bodies in the physical world. If you don't want to be on screen, you just stick away from the camera. How do you do that when your physical agency is dislocated from the data and the algorithm and that virtual environment? And so anyone is about setting up that kind of consent giving paradigm where you can kind of actively and in an ongoing sense give consent to the content experiences that you're recreated in a hyperreal manner.
It's wild. So I've done deep fakes before, and as much as it's like, wow, this is amazing, it is only amazing when you give it like good data. So like faces from the front, it can handle really well. But the moment you go like this or like this, it falls down. I noticed in the deep fake Tom Cruise videos, the profiles were pretty good. It did drift a little bit, but like the profiles are the hardest thing to do. You tend to get these really weird looking things. If you turn off to the side, it just goes completely wrong. Like if I do this, you can see my mustache sticking out. You just can't handle it. But from the front, it's pretty convincing. So what's actually going on with this technology to enable this to happen?
Yeah, so but you touched on one thing, which is data set quality. It's very difficult for an algorithm this type of algorithm that we're using for Deepface Live that you're using right now, to kind of fill in the gaps effectively if it doesn't have input data that covers those angles, or maybe that lighting situation or something like that. I think you could imagine that this set of the current generation of algorithms and the supporting tools which kind of exist around it are very prototype, generation 1, generation 0.1 maybe. And so over time, they will develop, and this is what we build at Metaphysic really, to a point where, and this is the kind of stuff that we deploy on Deep Tom Cruise as opposed to what you're using right now. They'll develop to support synthesized data, automated synthesized data to fill up gaps in data sets, to match up those profile things as you're kind of creating the synthetic likeness in a live setting. Lots and lots of things like that are kind of, I would say, not the core algorithm itself, but things which support the core algorithm and the core hyperreal outcome, all of which need to be built. And there's really nothing in this space at all. And then popped up a couple of algorithms, and then all of that supporting infrastructure, tooling, and software is being built out currently. So it's very much early days, and we're moving as fast as we possibly can to get to kind of automated hyperreal synthetic content output that is robust and doesn't break when you turn to the side and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, you'll solve it as well. I think that's the thing that we have to be very mindful of. All of the things that would have probably felt futuristic and out of reach and impossible even just like 5 years ago, they're very much achievable now, and it's going to accelerate. How do you view the metaverse? Do you see something good coming out of what Meta's doing with their version of the metaverse?
So I am an open metaverse guy by default. And so when I look at, say, the presentation back in October, I see across nearly all the vectors of development and ways in which things can go in the metaverse, Facebook is absolutely nailing that directionality, right? And then the actual implementation is coming along. We all understand how difficult it is to render out things at scale, and they may look a little cartoony. The elements where they didn't really touch upon, they kind of just gave a few hints towards, was interoperability, how things would interact with the open metaverse, and then I think they gave some more hints recently with I think it was the fees that they dropped around their kind of VR environment, netting out to be something like 47.5%, which, in the context of Web3 and fees in that ecosystem today, open Web3, is outstanding that got past their communications department, honestly. So I think proof is in the pudding that as to whether they will integrate wholeheartedly into the developments which are being driven by decentralized developers all around the world. And so that sets up, I think, what will happen ultimately is a set of closed metaverses which don't interact particularly well with the open metaverse. And they'll be run by big companies that we mostly trust and offer great, fantastic services. There's no doubt that these guys, Apple and Facebook, will drop awesome, convenient products that everybody wants to use, right? That's their game. And then the question is, will they be able to create the incentives in the face of Open Web3 to bring across developers and users where they're taking 50% of the money instead of 2% of the money, or less than 2.5% of the money every time a content interaction is rendered or somebody pays for entertainment in the metaverse or some kind of experience? I think ultimately that is something that they can't win unless they're prepared to give up more of the profit.
It's an interesting question. There's going to be a lot of people who jump ship. There's going to be a lot of talent drain towards, building your own systems and building your own products on an open metaverse. Excuse me. You mentioned the word interoperability there. And I think that, for me, is a hangover from a different time. it says we have a thing and it needs to be manipulated and changed and altered in order to function elsewhere. And that feels like a bit of a band-aid to put on what we actually want to happen. And I was reading an article by John Radoff about composability. And when we think about DeFi and the composability of DeFi protocols, that for me is what I think an open metaverse should be. It should be openly composable. And then interoperability isn't even an issue anymore. It's just like, of course, it's all composable, and this can be taken here and taken there and taken everywhere. And so I think when we talk about interoperability, it's a word that's going to disappear very, very quickly as more and more composable options appear, and it becomes apparent how good composability actually is. Vector, I'm going to hand over to you, my friend, because we've got about 6 minutes left before we have to jump into the next thing. Do you have questions for Tom?
Yeah, I guess I had some experience then with you see the angle on the entertainment side of thing. I was using an app called Synthesia. Have you seen that one? So
Synthesia.
Yeah, it's a combination maybe of partly deep fake for the maybe expressions, but they use a live action. I think they use a live action actor, right? And then they generate from there. Is that true?
If it's the one that I'm thinking of, it's mostly like a corporate use case. It's kind of like an uncanny version. Then you type in text and it will animate the person saying that. Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that version of the person is fully synthetic and AI generated. Yeah.
Oh, because I used one of their videos and somebody tagged a female actor, and maybe they just looked. Maybe they modeled.
Yeah, also known as an actress.
Yeah. Or an actor, right? They gather data from real people in order to make those models, and then the output's fully synthetic, I think. So some of those people might be identifiable real people, even though the person's fully abstracted away from the content.
Okay. But this is a similar use case in that it will generate content for whatever you want, a presentation or some kind of thing that you could do, but you just outsource it to your AI version of you or something like you.
Yep, exactly.
And there's going to be versions of ourselves that wander around the metaverse while we're asleep. Our meat selves are asleep that are fully coherent and fully loaded up with things that we might say and able to act on our behalf because we've permissioned them correctly, powered by AI. That's the thing that is, for me, it's like, okay. It's like you can kind of program your lights from an app at work.
Yeah.
Or robot vacuum cleaners. That's going to be you, but your meta self.
So to the extent that happens in the future, right? It's like kind of an AI chatbot is trained on the way in which you interact, and then a fully synthetic, hyperreal version of yourself is wandering around and having interactions with people without your direct intervention, like you're not driving it behind the scenes. That's weird, right? And it's weird if that's happening without our consent, or those interactions are things which we don't have knowledge of or give consent to. So this is one of the places where I think that we have to think deliberately about how we allow third-party companies to use our data and who we are in order to fuel content experiences which benefit them economically, right? So if we consent to being a NPC inside somebody's game and walking around, and we give up our data in order for them to create that character, then if it's worked out such that you get a really big, good slice of the revenue from that game and you consent to that and you're okay with that, then that's great. If suddenly you're having conversations about things which make you uncomfortable, then maybe that's not great. And so the way in which you give consent to that kind of circumstance is really important. And we need that to be a central pillar, because whenever there is money to be made, people will be exploited. And that is, we are talking about the digital versions, the hyperreal digital versions of real people being put to work without compensation in this new virtual world. It kind of sounds like stuff that people have been doing in the real world for, hundreds of years. And it's not okay, right? Just because it is in some kind of metaverse. So this stuff is going to pop up, and we need to work hard to address it and find ways to give consent and control to individuals.
Yes, and as is the way with these things, something needs to go wrong. There needs to be a hack. There needs to be an exploit for us to understand the consequences of these things going wrong. Tom, this has been fascinating. This is an area that I think is just going to be such a real defining frontier of exploration, both philosophically and technologically, for us as a species moving forward. It is so profound and so deep, and I'm very happy that we had a chance to talk at this very, very early stage, particularly since I'm using the technology live, and it cost me nothing. That's the thing. This was free. I didn't have to pay anything. This is not expensive. It's just like I can just do it, and I'm watching it in real time, track my face, and understand how to turn me into Sylvester Stallone in real time. And it's janky as hell, but that's now.
It's good quality, right? That specific set of algorithms only came out 3 or 4, 5 months ago or so. It's pretty impressive.
And that's the thing. The more people use it, the better it gets. So it's this thing that's infinitely refinable and always learning and always on, and gets better. Crazy stuff. Vector, any last questions for Tom before we go?
No, but I'd just like to state I'm still mildly scared. Less scared, but mildly.
Yeah, no, it's good to be scared. It's good to be scared because the implications
Survival
of
skills.
the implications of an evil version of this are bad. But it's the same thing for any new frontier. There are always beasts out there that need to be tamed in order for civilizations to thrive, and that's basically how life is, you know. And we'll either get it right and we'll thrive, or we will get it wrong and we'll be destroyed. That's Darwinism. So on that very healthy note, thanks so much, Tom, for joining us from Metaphysic. If you want to know more about Metaphysic, it is metaphysic.ai. Please do go and check it out, because we're talking about the most fundamental, kind of profound, deep questions about us and our identity in the upcoming version of whatever it is we're going to call reality or hyper reality. Definitely worth taking a look. The other one is any.one as well. Definitely ways for you to get involved in there if you're a content creator using AI and are just particularly interested in hyper real experiences. Really amazing stuff. Coming up, we're going to have an interview with Arlo Eisenberg and Alex Smil from ASM Labs. ASM, if you don't know, they are building the AI brains that will live inside NFTs that become these NPCs wandering around the metaverse. So he's got a lot to say about particularly how we communicate and about education as well. So really interesting interview there as well. That's all coming up. But first, thanks again to Tom. Thanks again to Vector. And we'll see you next week for more of the same. See ya.
NFTgo.io is an all-in-one NFT platform to help you find everything you need to know about the marketplace. Hungry for data? Get informed on market sentiments, upcoming collections, data of top collections, and even the behaviors of the biggest whales around. There's always something more you can learn about any specific collection, like the price trend of that collection you have, who co-owns the project with you, and their trading habits. It's all right there. And it even helps you find the lowest price on the market for you to make an informed decision, which, let's face it, is a big helping hand. Check out NFTgo.io today.
Today on the stream, we have Alex from Non-Fungible Labs, and we have something of a legend in the shape of Arlo Eisenberg. And it's hard to describe to anyone who isn't a dipshit like me just what a big figure in the space Arlo Eisenberg was. But this is like early 90s. This is the kind of the golden era of extreme sports. We're talking Tony Hawk, Arlo Eisenberg. And like I used to one day I will be able to spin. I'll go and switch, spin 360 on a rail, and like do like a Unity on a, and then that never happened.
Awesome.
Because I don't know if you can tell, like I'm a posh English guy, and like that world was so far away from me. It's crazy. But so this is me setting you up, Arlo, as someone who was like hot shit, like back when hot shit really meant something. And it's the golden age of MTV. It was the golden age of extreme sports and the X Games and all that stuff. So cool. I mean, like, tell me a little bit about your journey into where we are now and what you're up to, because it's you've got some stories to tell. That's for sure.
For sure. But first, let me ask, how come when you were listing kind of like 90s action sports icons, you mentioned Tony Hawk, which is a no-brainer, but you also mentioned Mike Rooftop Escamilla. How come you mentioned him?
Because I wanted you to know that I was legit. No, because I spent 8 days on the road with him and the Jackass guys
Oh, right.
and a whole bunch of other people, um, like Run Dunn and Bamajera. So,
Yeah.
and like, and Rooftop is one of those guys who defined his sport in a way that I think few people really get. And like Tony's obviously a no-brainer, but like there were so many of those guys who were genuine pioneers, and Rooftop just like so impressed me when I met him. He's such an awesome dude and was doing such crazy stuff that still people find hard to this day. That's what I find so amazing. So that's why I brought him up.
Well, so the reason I ask is because, I was a rollerblader and I had a rollerblading company in the 90s called Senate, which was a really big like action sports company. We made apparel and accessories. But one of the only non-rollerbladers that we ever sponsored was Rooftop, right? Because he's a freestyle BMXer. But when you say, you're not sure if people appreciate like his contributions or what he did, like we were really into what he was doing. It was like street, it was cool, it was dangerous and innovative and stylish. So yeah, so I was really, when you mentioned Rooftop's name, my ears perked up. I'm like, of all the people to mention, why Rooftop? But so I really respect that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Watching the X Games back in the day, you saw these legends, and like I think rollerblading kind of died, right? It kind of got overtaken by
there's a resurgence
scooters.
right now.
Yeah, there's a resurgence right now. It's because everyone realized that scooters suck, but everyone thought rollerblades suck. And I think it was because it was just too easy for kids to strap on a pair and then clog up the skate park, right? It was basically that vibe.
Well, and because skateboarders really did not like it, and they carried a lot of influence at the time. So yeah, a lot of things contributed. But to kind of go now, it's a long way to answer your question. So I mentioned the company that we had, Senate. My partner in that company was Brooke Howard Smith. We started that company 30 years ago. We were both pro rollerbladers. It's how we met. It's how we knew each other. So now fast forward 30 years later, and Brooke has become like a celebrity in New Zealand. He started all these companies, and his most notable company now is Non-Fungible Labs, and they have become, a major presence in the NFT space and kind of in like metaverse innovation. And so after Fluff World, where they had the huge success with Fluff, he called me just because we'd had a history and he's familiar with my art. And he asked if I'd be interested, or he thought there was a good opportunity for us to collaborate on a project again. And so we started working on it, and we made it happen. We minted about a month ago and sold out a 10K collection. So far it's been an exciting ride.
So tell me a little about your art, because you were always designing and you were always making graphics and things. And I think you had a long history of designing graphics for various different companies as like the lead designer. But how did that all begin? Because I think the collection that you've created has a sort of strange history of you just doodling, basically.
Yeah, so it's two things. So you're right. I've had a long history of being a graphic designer, and that began because I went to an arts high school, so I've always been predisposed toward art. And then when we started skating, and we had skating companies like Senate, it just sort of naturally fell to me to do the graphics, even though at that point I probably was underqualified, was not really professional designer, but just kind of learned on the job. And then that kind of parlayed into a real career as a legitimate designer, where even after skating, I started working in some mainstream agencies. And so, yes, so now I would say, whereas it was kind of a rough start, now I'm a pretty well-established graphic designer. And then Drug Receipts in particular was, it was not graphic design at all. It really was just doodling on receipts at restaurants and bars and things. And when we decided to, or when we first conceived of this project of doing an NFT collection together, I'd been drawing on receipts for 7 years or something and posting them to an Instagram account. And so we just sort of had 7 years of this kind of sort of this raw intellectual property. And we decided to make that the foundation for the NFT collection. And that's Drug Receipts.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have this collection of artists who have just made work because they wanted to make work. People is obviously the most standout example of this, just masochistically doing something every day because that was his thing. But you also have people who've come in and just made specifically for capturing this energy in this moment of now. were you ever drawn to, hey, look, we can make some money here, or are you successful enough and mindful enough of your own brand to be careful about how you navigate that space?
Well, the two aren't mutually exclusive. Obviously, when the idea was pitched, one of the prospects is that it's an opportunity to make money, but it's not the kind of driving principle behind the thing. Brooke is independently successful. I'm independently successful. Our third partner, Tyler, is independently successful. So for me, what I saw here was an opportunity to really just kind of dive into my art 100%. And you mentioned that Beeple does art every day, right? So as a professional designer, I've been designing every day, but a lot of that has been for other people. So here with Drug Receipts, I saw a unique opportunity to really focus on kind of my own artistic expression. And that's really what it's become. However it was pitched or whatever people think of NFTs, but knowing what I know now, there are probably easier ways to make money. It's a lot of hard work, honestly, and it never ends. I mean, the fact that I'm able to take this call at 2 a.m. is only because I've been working up to this very moment. There's just always work to be done. So it's all thrilling and rewarding work, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, this is a perfect opportunity to bring you in, Alex, because you're not just doing one project, you're doing like a whole quiver of them, and like I don't know how you even sleep. It's insane. So give us a little snapshot of your life at the moment.
Yeah, so I guess to give some backstory, so I co-founded Non-Fungible Labs with Brooke, start of last year alongside 4 other co-founders, so 6 of us in total, and things really got running when we launched Fluff World in August last year, which is crazy to think that's only 8 months ago now. At the time, we had 2 full-time employees. Now we're at, I think, 42. That's excluding contractors, partners. It's the rate of growth has been incredible. And just within the Fluff World ecosystem, we have 5 main collections. Oh, it's hard to keep up even for myself. Then we've obviously been working with Arlo to bring his incredible artwork to life with Drug Receipts. We just announced our partnership with Altered State Machine and Authentic Brands Group to launch a Metaverse boxing game under the Muhammad Ali brand called the Next Legends, which is incredibly exciting to be able to kind of now work with like the biggest name in sporting history, really. It's such an exciting project to even just talk to people about, because I feel like a lot of people have their own kind of personal relation to Muhammad Ali, because he was more than an athlete, because it was about the kind of pilgrimage, the spiritual journey, the struggle, and so to be able to bring that to life is incredibly exciting. And there's a number of other ones that are still in various stages of NDAs and pre-development, but just to see the rate of growth has been honestly beyond what I ever could have imagined. For me, I don't kind of consider myself a creative in that sense. I've always been more logical but have kind of surrounded myself with creatives, because most of the creatives that I know are just so busy creating. They're so often, they don't think about how can I actually make a living off this a lot of the time. And that was like my co-founder and creative director, Jesse Metcalf, was just one of those perpetual struggling artists that would just create things and experiment just with no real kind of end goal in sight. So to be able to work with him and to be able to expand this creative team, and also and to work in this industry where it is just about kind of unlocking people's creativity. I mean, the whole move towards Web3, towards the metaverse, in my view, the biggest kind of the biggest aspect of it is to really allow people to kind of reclaim creativity. And I think we're all born creative to a certain extent, some more than others, but I think our current educational system definitely kind of squeezes that out of most of us. And yet now we, through what we're doing with Fluff World and, creating all of these assets and building decentralized intellectual property that's co-created from the ground up by this community, we're giving these assets to people. And, we have people in their 40s, 50s opening Blender for the first time and just playing with these models and experimenting and creating again. And this is kind of what this whole industry feels like a bit, is basically just grown-up kids playing again to a certain extent. It's like being back and kind of watching your kind of after school cartoons and kind of having that nostalgia, but being invested in it and taking a part in it and helping shape that story as well. And that's really the most exciting thing for me about this industry, is to be able to kind of empower people to explore creativity and also to kind of, I think, rethink education in the process. I think the gaming side, there's this beautiful kind of concept of flow state where you're, in that perfect combination of skill and of challenge, perfect level of challenge and enjoyment, where it just flows, and you're not even thinking, it just comes out of you. And we see this a lot in like action sports and in creativity, but also in gaming as well. And I think there is an incredible opportunity in front of us right now to rethink these kind of gaming and immersive environments and imbue them with education in a way that flips the whole current educational industry on its head. So, I mean, there's a lot going on there. I mean, that's the kind of just touching on some of the elements that get me excited about where we are right now, because it really does feel like we're kind of laying the foundations for the next iteration of the internet. And I guess that's why I don't sleep anymore.
Man, it's so funny hearing you talk, because there's like this idea of crypto that it's like guys in their 20s just dreaming shit up in their bedroom, and then just because they have no ties in the real world, they just go and do stuff. But the thing you said there is like guys in their 40s and 50s opening a Blender. Like, you forget that, like, when you've done 20 years of like work, shit. You've actually got some miles on the clock. You actually know how to do stuff. And there's a ton of transferable skills that you just need someone to tell you, you know what? You can do this. You have permission. And we talk about permissionless and the ability for anyone to jump in, but like Arlo, I can see on your face that you have sat in meetings with clients who have just torn something you love to pieces, rounded off all the sharp corners and the bits that make it sexy and cool. And you've had to put your name to it and go, okay. And that's it. And you had no comeback. And I can see it in your face. I know you've had those conversations. I've had exactly the same ones. But like, I wonder how you feel about the opportunity in front of you to be, as Alex said, just a free creator.
Yeah, it's exciting. And you're right, especially in context that you've stated, right? Where, I've done so much professional work for other people, and you really do, you kind of go through that process where you're always making compromises or concessions to the client. And in this way, there's kind of full free creative freedom, except for you do kind of have a client in the form of your community. But it feels much more collaborative, and you're kind of you build the community around kind of shared ideals and values, so that the collaboration feels you feel aligned kind of in your direction. And I find that the contributions from the community are always worthwhile and on point, and the work usually ends up being better for their input than without it. So. Yeah.
Well, that's very brave, because I think when you're young, you assume that you know best. And it's very hard when someone steps up and says, well, I don't know. And like, as you get older, you go, yeah, actually bring it on, because I'm big enough to accept the criticism. And I know when it kind of works for me and everything else. Alex, you were talking about education. I want to dig into that a bit deeper. What do you mean by education? Do you mean like school system education, or just general life knowledge, or the University of Webster? What is that exactly?
I mean, I think it's all of these. Like, education can't be kind of just seen as one individual component. We do have a very kind of rigid educational structure in general globally, that kind of basically puts people into this is what you're studying. This is what you're studying. It doesn't generally cater well to creatives. It kind of leans more towards more logical, structured thinking. But even looking at, the developments that are happening now with artificial intelligence, to be able to use tools like that to kind of build dynamic educational platforms, and then use, immersive gaming environments or kind of virtual reality, these sorts of experiences to challenge people and to understand their skill set and where to drive them. I mean, it's funny for me, hiring so many people at the moment. And if you look at like a traditional, CVs bore the shit out of me. I'd much rather just like jump on a call and get a feel for someone. But also, like, if someone had the gall to put like, yeah, I've successfully, led a team in a raid of World of Warcraft on Molten Core or something like on their CV, I'd be like, this guy knows people management. Okay, like, and this is actually like where a lot of this sort of education often comes from. It is, we learn a certain amount of things in school, but it's so limited, and we need to go and kind of learn from life, often because the traditional education system is so lacking. I studied a Bachelor of Business and Information Management, but at the same time I was working in hospitality and in fine dining, and I think I probably learned more just working at this restaurant and learning how to read people and tailor service and that sort of thing than I did from my business degree, because I think no matter what you're doing, there's an element of customer service to it, and hospitality is the most pure form of customer service. So to be able to kind of, especially in a busy restaurant, and roll with the punches and adapt, as opposed to a very strict, rigid, exam structure where, like, when have you ever been in an exam type environment outside of an educational institution? Like, especially nowadays, we have all of this wealth of information available to us. We are essentially kind of cyborgs already, because we have iPhones constantly in our hand and have access to this wealth of information. So it's tricky, because you see how traditional structures like education or like government, for example, are so slow to adapt to technological change. And I think that's one of the big issues that we are seeing, especially in governance and regulation around crypto, is, you have it kind of trying to be regulated, or at least even understood, by these traditional structures that just aren't dynamic or adaptive enough to really understand them. And by the time they do, it's already 4 stages down the line, because this industry moves so quickly. So I think for the educational side, this goes back to like, let's make learning fun. And how do we do that? Let's engage, let's play to learn. Everyone talks about play to earn, but it's, play to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Play and learn. My kids, I've tried to resist giving them an iPhone, but like, they're like, Daddy, we want to play Roblox. And my daughter at breakfast this morning, she's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to build this. I'm like, you're already in the metaverse.
Yeah.
You're like 10 years old. You're going to own and rule the earth in the metaverse. Yeah. And it's happening in front of me, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. It's wild. Arlo, are you aware of the skate school in Malmo, where they built a high school and it's based around skateboarding? So you can go there, and the curriculum is basically, we believe that skateboarding is a better outlet for these kids to learn, and they're all massive high achievers. They get great grades, but they also, pro skating is just built into the school. It's the first of its kind anywhere in the world, but like, that opened in 2019, and I think it showed the world that, like, extreme sports kids who would otherwise be just doing it outside of school can be really high achievers, even just building in that athleticism or that counterculture into their lives. It's wild, man.
It's really cool.
You probably didn't know about it, but yeah, it's real. It's crazy.
No, I didn't know about it, but it makes sense. Schools already have sports built into them. They all have football programs or soccer programs, whatever. But anything that you can do that taps into a child's interest, where you can teach them sort of focus and commitment and motivation and teamwork and just any of those things, self-discipline, it's a great way to teach life lessons, right? And so if a lot of kids already are finding action sports on their own, but it's until now it's been all extracurricular. If you can channel that and bring it into a more structured environment where you can really maximize the impact on the child's life, then I think that's really an innovative and cool idea.
So my counter argument to that is, I want my kids to be doing stuff that I don't know about.
Yeah,
I want them
right.
to be rebellious. I want them to be trying to get around the rules that we set. And this is the cognitive dissonance I have, because I am inherently rebellious. I inherently want to do things differently, tear shit up, be different, be weird. And of course, you want your kids to play by the rules and not be in trouble. But secretly, I kind of want them to be in trouble. I don't know how to reconcile that. Because all the things you're talking about, like, that's not the Arlo Eisenberg I knew. You were the motherfucker. You were like the guy with, like, he doesn't give a shit. That was
here's the thing. Here's one way maybe you can reconcile it. And so I agree with you, right? So maybe part of the beauty of action sports is that they are not structured and that they are not, there is no authority, right? It's done outside of authority and it is kind of an FU. But I went to an arts high school, right? So I studied visual arts and theater in high school. And instead of having sports or anything, we studied art. And it was a great experience. A lot of teenagers will talk about what a miserable experience their teenage years and their high school experience was. Mine was fantastic. I loved it. And so it's possible, if you don't just use skateboarding, for instance, as, a wedge or a Trojan horse to smuggle in, conventional notions of authority and obedience and, discipline to students. But if you actually custom tailor the curriculum to reflect the values of skateboarding, so that you're bringing people into an environment that's not just like standard school plus skateboarding, but it's where the entire school, the entire curriculum is designed around sort of ideas of like self-expression and individuality and creativity. So in that way, you're not co-opting skateboarding and turning it into something it's not. You're actually taking education and reimagining it based kind of on the same ideals of, that skateboarding's always espoused.
I just had a funny visual of, skateboarders sneaking off to do maths, behind the building.
Exactly right.
And rebel and try and do their physics homework.
Alex, this idea that the metaverse can be a place of self-expression is one that I think we're going to hear more and more. With non-fungible labs, what are you trying to create with your vision of the open metaverse to facilitate that?
I think it comes in different stages. What we've done initially with Fluff World is to start with characters, then build small spaces with the burrows that can be customized, then build into kind of larger community spaces. Then the vision is to build, a world and then a world of world platforms. For me, I feel like there's an inherent flaw with the kind of leading metaverse platforms, being so Decentraland and Sandbox, and that they're not really scalable. If you ever go into Decentraland, 99% of the time there's nothing happening, and the vast majority of the land is just parked by investors that are hoping to flip it for a profit down the line, really. And the issue is once they get past a certain number of users, they can't add more land because everyone who owns existing land would be up in arms. You can never get to Facebook's 2.8 billion users in a model like that. So what we're looking at is how you kind of build out this concept of infinite scarcity. And to us, that looks like, highly curated environments that take the best of like AAA title games like Assassin's Creed or World of Warcraft and mix in certain elements of community generated content. But then within each of those worlds, it's immersive and it's engaging and it's fun. There's always something going on. And, using altered state machines, AI protocol, for example, you can put brains into your NFTs when you're not using them and have them act as NPCs in this world and kind of help add to that level of immersion. But then other worlds can be added to this universe or metaverse platform, which means that, you know, each one of those worlds can be from a different kind of rights holder, or it could be built up from the community. But the value of the land is then dictated by the level of immersion and engagement and community behind each of these worlds. But because it's all built within this kind of infinitely scalable platform, interoperability is done from the start. You know,
okay, but how is interoperability done from the start?
Because it's all built within the same platform. It's not like you're jumping between, you know, Sandbox and Decentraland. This is like, it's one scalable platform, all built in the same engine. All, you know, you'd have the set of standards on kind of poly counts and you know, model interoperability and rigging and all of that sort of stuff. Now, once again, this is just, you know, one platform. There'll be tens, hundreds, thousands potentially of different platforms, and interoperability between these platforms is a much bigger issue that we need to address, and something that, you know, shouldn't be dictated by one person or one company. I think it's really for the industry to come together and start addressing some of these issues. You know, interoperability is a big one, and it's, you know, one of the biggest buzzwords in the industry, but currently nothing really is interoperable. Other big ones are, you know, how do you deal with things like, you know, moderation and reputation in the metaverse, especially when people are anonymous? How do you deal with security, for example? Because, you know, there's no police force on the blockchain. If I get scammed, I can't say, hey, you know, give that NFT back, because that goes against the very fundamentals of blockchain. So, you know, we either deal with it from an educational standpoint, which is incredibly important, but then we also have to understand what better tools we can have on the kind of front end interaction. So, like, you know, blind signing with MetaMask to me is a massive issue, because whenever you click on a MetaMask transaction, you don't know what you're signing. Sometimes you're just like, yep, cool, like, and apparently they've added more information, but most of the time, to me, that's just long hex codes or something. So if they were to add something that basically said, hey, you know, by the way, this transaction will let them clean out your wallet, that might at least, you know, have some impact on the amount of scams we see in the space. And it wouldn't necessarily be seen as a rite of passage to get scammed in this industry to finally kind of, you know, be one of us. There's a whole kind of range of these sorts of things. And we actually kind of put out a call to arms at South by Southwest to help build this Metaverse manifesto with us. And I've been speaking with a few other kind of industry people with, like Alan Smithson and Krista Kim and these sorts of thought leaders who are, you know, really kind of all aligned that, you know, this is our opportunity to kind of reshape the internet. And we all have this great ambitious vision for it. But at the moment, everyone's just charging off on their own. And it's almost like, you know, I'm working in metric and you're working in imperial. And then in 2 years' time, we start trying to slot our different kind of parts together, and we realize that none of it fits because we're all working to different standards. So to be able to at least bring, you know, we have some of the smartest people in the world working in these industries. Let's get them together on specific kind of committees that are focused on security, interoperability, ethics, sustainability, all of these sorts of fundamental topics, and then ensure that as we all start charging forward, we at least know that 6 months, 12 months, 10 years down the line, it's all going to work together.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brave ambition. I always think about it like this: that we live in a culture where we're sort of overserved with the ease with which stuff can look amazing. You know, you can just tag it, we put an Instagram filter on, you can do a Snapchat filter, you can become someone else. On a live stream last week, I was just shifting between being Sliced Alone and Jim Carrey, like instantly. And it makes everything feel like it has a surface and an interface layer. But basically, at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of data sets, all of us. And data sets should be very easy to interoperate if we can agree on, like, a human equals this set of data. That's it. And then you get there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it's you know, a lot of this, we've dealt with these sorts of issues before in the past with, you know, Blu-ray versus DVD and, you know, different kind.
Satan, Laserdisc is the only god. Laserdisc. You know, there's guys like in California that have built whole home theaters just for the cult of the Laserdisc, because the Laserdisc is god.
It's brilliant. And so much of it is actually coming full circle. Like, I have a great vinyl collection because it's interesting. Like, you look at what was it, like a month ago, suddenly Spotify went down, and everyone's like, what do I do? You know, there we go. Is that
treasure
yeah, straight out of
possession, you
Compton.
know, like
Of course. And if you don't know, now you know. But this is the crazy thing. Like, you look at, you know, Spotify went down, and we went from like owning music physically to owning it digitally to just streaming it, and then Spotify goes down, and we're like, how do I listen to music now? And everyone kind of panics. So, I mean, yes, you bust out the vinyl, but also this is where the creative aspects of Web3 and the kind of direct relationship between creators and consumers has become so empowering, because, you know, we've featured a number of visual artists and musicians through our ecosystem, and, you know, just one drop to our community can earn them more than they would off, you know, 10 million streams on Spotify. You know, 1 million streams on Spotify only gets you like $650.
Well, it can now. It can now. That's the thing. So we're talking about this paradigm shift from ownership was everything. Like, your record collection sat on a shelf, and people would come to your house and they would look at you, and they would feel like they knew you by what music you listened to and what you collected. And there would always be some stinkers in there. You go, ha ha ha! Look, you've got this MC Hammer album. Please, Hammer, don't hurt him, from like '92. You'd be like, yes, I bought that. I am that douchebag. And then and then that all went away. So that self-expression went away. So we traded ownership for access. And when I think NFTs,
but we still have that. We still have that, though, in terms of like, you can see what people are listening to on Spotify, or like you can look into someone's wallet now and see, oh, you like this kind of art or this kind of music, and it's shifted from the physical to the digital. And when people are like, why does digital identity matter? It's like, well, how many people engage with your physical identity on a day-to-day basis versus how many people engage with you digitally? For the vast majority of people, it's going to be much, much greater on the digital side.
Yeah. And I think there was this idea of access. So there were a bunch of things that you couldn't have, either because you couldn't afford them or because it was just impossible to get hold of them. And now access is it's a commodity. Basically, you can access anything you want anytime for free. Music is free, videos are free. Like,
I was
we can
just
find
at my sister's house, and my 9-year-old niece is producing electronic music now. Like 10 years ago, she wouldn't, like, should have to have some hardware. 20 years ago, she'd have to have a whole crazy, you know, like expensive rack set up. But now it's just on her iPad, and she's pulling in samples. She's recording her own samples. You know, she's like, I was a DJ for years, and this 9-year-old girl is schooling me now on music production.
Oh man. You just want to take the kids, plonk them in front of some 1210s, and say, listen, beat match that. Beat match that now.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no auto sync here, is there?
Button. There's no master tempo button. What's I supposed to do here?
Why
ribbon?
Why does the pitch change if I push that?
Yeah, it doesn't do what I want. Yeah. Arlo, we've cut you out of the conversation here. Let's go full circle. What's your take on the metaverse? How do you feel about this emerging weird space that we're in?
Well, I would like to go all the way back to the conversation we were having about education, because one of our pillars in drug receipts is skepticism, scientific skepticism. And, you know, when Alex talks about the shortcomings of our current educational systems, I think that the lack of good scientific literacy, scientific education is a major, major problem. Especially as you guys have pointed out, you know, we live in an information age, and we all have access to so much information, and that is only, you know, growing by orders of magnitude. So the most important skill that we can give to any child growing up in this environment is a way to meaningfully navigate all the information, and to discern between, you know, meaningful, reliable information and, you know, dangerous or not reliable information. And without the only path forward there is critical thinking skills. And there are no standards for critical thinking curriculum. It's been woefully unaddressed, and so, or underaddressed. And so we've built it into, you know, our platform. It's one of the pillars of our project. And so, you know, our art is provocative and bright, and, you know, eye-catching, that we have a great community. We have a lot of really cool roadmap items, but baked into all of that one of the ideas that we're kind of smuggling in is this, this idea of skeptical education. And as Alex pointed out, as we go into Web3 and the metaverse, and there's a way to kind of, make education interactive and fun and interesting. If we can build, into that, or start at the core of that kind of skeptical education and find ways to introduce people to those ideas, then I think that is one of the utilities that we offer. I think that is unique. And by no means do we intend to it's nothing. We don't want to be the only ones offering it. We would love for it to be something that catches on, but we are certainly making it a major point of emphasis. And so one of the utilities that we offer is changing minds, right? Changing human minds. Because as we go into the metaverse, no matter how good all the technology is, and the innovation, the technology is very exciting. We're going to be in these fully immersive environments, but we will always be limited by our brains, right? There's still going to be human brains operating in these spaces. And so whatever shortcomings we have in the real world, we're going to take them into the metaverse with us. So without also upgrading the human brains that are going into this new environment, we will always be constrained kind of by our own limitations. So that's why that is, I think, an important part of our pillars.
Man, you speak my language here. One of the things that we talk about at the Defiant is challenge all assumptions, like run towards those who disagree with you. And it's interesting when Elon Musk was talking about how would we improve Twitter, and we talk about an edit button and then free speech. I think you would radically improve all of these platforms if you gave people a "would you like to see an opposing view" button. So we have this filter bubbles thing where the platforms serve you more of what they think you like. But if there was an opt-in where you could say, well, show me what I don't like, and I can get that served up to me, and then you can set times on it, like give me 60 seconds of shit that I don't like. And you're like, oh, damn. And like that, the thing about hearing something you disagree with is that it keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you thinking and keeps you learning. Like the moment you're right, you enter a period of stasis. And in screenwriting, which is the world I come from, like you set up characters for whom stasis equals death. Like the moment you're in stasis, you are effectively emotionally and educationally dead. And so you want to be in the opposite environment. So I love being wrong. Like who says that? I love being wrong. I love to be proved wrong, and I love to have egg on my face, and I love to be shown, no, you're an idiot. And then I'm like, fantastic, because I'm still learning, and I love that, and I want to be in a process of still learning. But I think people just want to embrace comfort and being right, because being wrong feels uncomfortable, but it shouldn't. Being wrong should be the best place ever.
Yeah, growth feels uncomfortable, but that's the only way we're ever going to be more. No, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, and I've always kind of tried to live by the ethos that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And that's not just one linear kind of measure as well. Someone might be the smartest in ethics, and someone else might be the smartest in coding. There's a whole range of different metrics that you can use to measure intelligence. But that whole thing of, that actually would be brilliant if just show me what the opposite, like show me the opposite of my echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly.
I try and do that actively because having traveled quite a lot, I've met a lot of people with different viewpoints who are lovely, in person, some of the most lovely people you ever meet. But then social media often brings out the kind of the biggest, most violent opinions in anyone, and it's very easy to just go unfollow or block or whatever. But to actively challenge yourself and let yourself be uncomfortable and critically think about that, and why does this make me feel uncomfortable? What inherent belief system is being challenged right now, and is that even right in the first place? It's very rare actually in society nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the best experiences of my life have been the ones I didn't expect. Like, and I see it on Netflix. It goes 98% match, 99% match. I'm like, no, I want the 20% match. I want the film about Bulgarian pig farmers. There's no English. It's silent and it's black and white. I want that in my life. Otherwise, like, what are you doing? And it's really hard to escape that. And like the moment you start searching on YouTube, suddenly everything changes. And you're like, stop it. I want to find the weird stuff. But maybe I am weird. Maybe that's just me. But like,
all the best people are. You know,
Yeah,
it's Alice in Wonderland quote there.
Like midget wrestling from Chechnya. I want to see that. I might not like it, but I want to see it.
You know, and at least you know. At least you'll know. You'll never wonder what if I did watch that midget wrestling from Chechnya.
Exactly. The world is full of really weird and wonderful things, and if we homogenize everything, then we lose that diversity and variety and weirdness. And I think one of the things about the fluff ecosystem is inclusivity as well. And it's really important to be inclusive and hear all voices and everything else. But
yeah, it's especially like, you know, so much of what the metaverse is about is storytelling, and that's actually what sets us apart as a species from, you know, other animals. So throughout this process, and you know, I'm saying this as a white man, I do not want the metaverse to be designed exclusively by white men. Like, I want it to be a full representation of the wild diversity that exists within the world, because that's what makes things interesting. And, you know, we're working actively to engage with First Nation storytellers and help empower, you know, these incredible diverse communities to bring their culture, their history, their stories into the metaverse in far more fun and engaging environments, because, you know, that way it's going to keep these stories alive forever.
Oh, it's so funny. I as you were saying that, I just remembered an image of Arlo sitting on the toilet from One Blade Mag, and then like the classic Arlo, like you had these massive mutton chops, sideburns. Oh, dude, you're such a legend. It's just funny going back and like reminding myself of just watching you on TV late at night, because that was the only time we could watch it, and like
and now here we are.
And now here we are. So you never really give me an answer to like your take on the metaverse. I'm curious how you see it and what you see the opportunities and maybe the risks are in that space.
Well, I'll just sort of riff off of what Alex was on here, talking about, you know, inclusivity and, you know, integrating culture, bringing culture into the metaverse, where, you know, culture can live forever. But there's an interesting sort of thought exercise here, an interesting angle where, you know, what we're talking about, right, are 3D rigged rabbits, right, in the metaverse, and, you know, burrows. I mean, it's kind of like a blank slate, right? We are almost erasing culture. I think to Alex's point, right, the more people that you have behind the scenes designing this stuff and sort of on the boards developing these things, then you get different perspectives kind of helping to create this world. But the truth is, we are on the precipice of entering a space where culture almost starts over or ceases to exist. Perhaps there will be remnants of it, you know, that make their way into the thing, but really it's going to be something almost unrecognizable to all the culture that came before it. And so it's kind of this like, and I don't know, this is pure, you know, pure philosophical thought exercise just off the cuff here. But it is interesting to think about what implications, what ramifications this will have for culture, whatever that means.
Yeah, there's a strong kind of idea that we're in what they call the fourth turning. This is a Strauss-Howe construction, and the fourth turning, there's four of them. There's like the high, the awakening, the unraveling, and then the crisis. And according to the authors of this idea, that this is an era of destruction, often involving war, revolution, in which institutional life is destroyed and rebuilt in response to a perceived threat to a nation's survival. And after the crisis, civic authority revives. Cultural expression redirects towards community purpose, and people begin to locate themselves as members of a larger group. I mean, doesn't that pretty much sum up where we are right now and everything we're kind of experiencing? It's weird how these kind of grand ideas do kind of play out, and what emerges out of this crisis moment is driven by artists and culture, and they're the ones that take the biggest risks. They're the ones that go and populate areas of cities which nobody wants to live in, and then create diversity and excitement, and then the rich assholes come and ruin it all. But that's, you know, that's where we are. That's part of the cycle of life.
But what is the crisis moment?
It can be anything, but it's defined by everything that we perceived as writ, as stable, is then proven to be unstable or is disrupted to the point where it can no longer be reestablished. And if you think of the US as an empire, I think it's pretty fair to say that it had its high point, 80s, 90s, couldn't have been higher, and now it's struggling to kind of figure out what the US or Americanism is in the early part of the 21st century. And we should stay away from politics, because it's not my happy place. Not my happy place. But
World War II, right, was a crisis moment, right? And you can see how the world was changed after that, and Germany and Japan in particular, right, and all of Europe, the whole world, really. That was an inflection point. But where I think it's sort of might not be entirely accurate to describe what's going on right now as a crisis moment. I mean, it seems like the metaverse, honestly, is more a product of kind of leisure and recreation. It's affluent communities in mostly peaceful times, just having a lot of time in their hands, a lot of resources, access to a lot of resources, and just a lot of excess brain power to put into something. And so it's more of a kind of like a novel aspirational pursuit that is that's made possible by kind of this prosperous times.
Yeah, and I think when we say crisis, it doesn't necessarily have to be perceived as oh my God, everything's terrible. But you have a pandemic, and you have a war in Ukraine, and you have Russian aggression and these kind of things, and it feels like there are a lot of assumptions that we built our lives around which need to be reassessed, and that's possibly what's going on here. And like, it could also be simply that as Alex was saying, the entire notion of how you educate a young human is in crisis. Teachers don't get paid enough. We know that for sure. And so maybe the crisis is in fact education. Education needs to be completely burnt to the ground and started again. And that would be a very difficult thing to accomplish, but maybe that's what's required.
It would, in part because most countries, or at least most Western countries, have such a short election cycle. You're in power for 4 years. You hope to get elected for another 4, and that's kind of it. To radically invest in reforming the educational system won't have any real perceived impact except a lot of expenditure for 10 years. And so it's like, who's actually going to take that plunge and say, I'm going to invest in something that's not going to get me reelected? It is possibly the best investment we could make as a country, but all of my competitors, all of my challengers will be screaming bloody murder about it, because all I'm doing is throwing money away in their eyes. And then the next person comes in, and 10 years later someone claims all the glory for how great the country's doing because of something that someone did 10 years prior.
Well, then you have China and the 100-year plan, right? And it's like we all go,
yeah.
This is horrifying. It's amazing what you can do if nobody has a choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
that's the other side of it, right?
An extremist view is, the best form of government is a benevolent dictator, because then they can just do what they need to do. And actually, funny enough, one of the first times I met Arlo, he referred to himself not as a creative director, but as a creative dictator.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Benevolent dictatorships are the best way to run creative industries. It's like, yes, we're all in it together, but I'm the boss. And like, we will decide on stuff, but I'm the boss. No, 100%. Like, if you grow up in creative industries, I make films for a living. Films are armies. They're produced by armies. You need an army mindset. It's funny enough, I'm going to meet a Ukrainian film producer today whose transferable skills were moving from being someone who moved people to a shoot to being someone who moved supplies to those who shoot. I mean, it's crazy. So she's moving like tourniquets and tactical helmets from wherever they can get them from Mexico, everywhere else, to the front line via Poland. The only way she can do it, this is the nuts thing, the only way she can do it, because the Ukrainians, as much as the Russians are getting fucked financially, Ukrainians are completely fucked. They can't do anything. You can't move money out of the country. You can't spend money on exports or imports. The only way you can do it is with crypto. So the dance she has to do, she receives funds, and then she has to send them to she has to convert them to crypto and then send them to a wallet receiver in Poland, who can then off-ramp them to a Polish bank account in order to pay for the supplies. Cannot do it any other way. It's crypto only, and it's only a small piece of the puzzle. But like, what a crazy story! That's when shit gets really real. Like, what is crypto doing? GM, all this crap, massive parties. And I know you guys had a massive party in South by Southwest. Shame on you.
We did.
The optics. Think of the optics.
The week before, we raised $411,000 for Ukraine, and have distributed that across 10 different charities now. I actually used to work quite extensively in Greece and Lebanon through the refugee crisis, and have a lot of contacts out there on the ground who are, actively ferrying people out of the country. So it is scary to see what's happening there now, but to also understand that what's happening with crypto and decentralization of finance is helping these everyday people in these situations where there isn't really an alternative, is a reminder that, what we're building here is not just a fad like a lot of people seem to think.
Well, there's a truth to it, and the optics are incredibly important. Arlo, is that something that troubles you sometimes, how this has been co-opted by morons to a degree and turned into some kind of giant circle jerk party fest that's all about money?
No, not really. I mean, you have to understand that, first of all, my whole introduction to this space began 9 months ago when Brooke called me. So it's been a crash course for me, but I've also been fairly well insulated. Like my entire experience mostly has been with non-fungible labs, has been in the Fluff ecosystem, sort of the best actors in the space, and really focused on our own art and our own project. So most of what I've been exposed to has been kind of the best aspects of it. I am aware, obviously, that what's out there. I just haven't had a whole lot of exposure to it. And, kind of to more directly answer your question, I guess I don't lose that much sleep over what other people are doing. As long as you can see a path forward, you can see, the vision for us, I think, is pretty clear. And so there's plenty for us to be focused on without having to lose any sleep or brain energy over what the douchebags are doing.
I mean, I claim myself as a douchebag. I can be very douchey, and I have no shame.
We've all got it in us, right?
We all have it in us. Like,
Okay,
there's an inner douchebag waiting to come out. We all watched American Pie, we know. Alex, what are your feelings on that? Because optics are, they're important. The marketing is important.
I mean, I guess since start of last year, in the first 6 months, I was just deep in the space and trying to understand what worked, what didn't. And it's interesting. So many of the kind of thought leaders at the time have now been exposed as, fraudsters and scam artists and these sorts of things. But also looking at, it still is, but even a year ago as well, it was just everyone was throwing stuff around to see what would stick. And it's interesting. As soon as you launch a successful collection, the blinders kind of go on, and you're like, I don't really know what's going. I'm sure I have a decent enough insight into what's happening in the space, but I'm not actively spending time in other discords or loads of time on Twitter or those sorts of spaces. I struggle to find time to actually go into our Discord anymore, and I've had to get my assistant to schedule blocks for me to go and hang out with the community because it's so important. But I feel like it's there's definitely people that are kind of bringing a bad name to the space, but the NFT in of that phrase, the acronym in of itself, has kind of got this bad rep purely because it's such a speculative industry. But you can apply it to like iOS app or website, or it's just the underlying tool that allows people to achieve a certain end. And someone recently, I was watching an interview with someone, and they made a really good point that the reason a lot of these projects fail is because a lot of the people behind them are kind of very tuned into social media. And to be successful on social media, you basically take an existing pattern, an existing structure, and you recreate it with your own content. So that's why we have 1,000+ different ape projects, 10,000 PFP ape projects. And somehow new ones keep coming out every week and people think it's revolutionary. Whereas actually what this is like, launching an app or trying to kind of launch a legitimate company where you have to define what separates you from the other existing competitors in the space. You have to really take the kind of Simon Sinek approach of like, start with why, like have a vision there that is far beyond what you're doing. And, that can't just be to make money either. That's just a byproduct of the process. But to actually look at like a why behind this that inspires not only your team, but your community, and therefore rallies everyone towards a common purpose, that's really where I see, true innovation happening in the space. And it is happening in certain areas with a lot of kind of creative tools around music and film, and also, how we kind of, as we touched on before, like empower everyday people to be more creative. But it's not going to come from another 10K8 project.
Well, it's interesting that as you were talking like 55 minutes ago, I was suddenly reminded of the fact that I don't think anyone's forked Fluffs. They haven't tried. They can't. Either they can't, or they don't want to, or they don't know how to. But yeah, it's true that no one's forked Fluffs or thingies or party bears.
I think I've seen one other project that was 3D animated and had music as a rarity built into it. But like at the time, we just looked at everything that was going on in the space, and we just tried to bring all of the best elements into one. And we thought, okay, we're doing something really cool and new here. That's going to lay the foundation for this ecosystem. But we'll have copycats roll in 3 to 6 months' time. It's now been close to 9 months, and I still don't feel like anyone's quite gotten there yet.
Well, I also don't think that they quite know what to make of it, because it's not just one thing, and then it's like, and then
rendering fur is a bitch, by the way, as well. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, I know. I was thinking that, like rendering fur. Oh yeah. Good luck with that. The last thing I want to touch on was the Seekers is the new project that's come out, and that one seems really interesting because it's infrastructure. So I'm curious if you could give us a little bit of an insight into what Seekers is all about.
So the team behind Seekers are one of our ecosystem partners in the Centrality group, called Silo, and they actually started. I feel like they were about 5-6 years ahead of their time, because they were kind of started with these roots in kind of world building and storytelling, and then pivoted to become a Web3 wallet and communications platform. So it's essentially like MetaMask, but with WhatsApp built into it. But what happened with Seekers and with the world that we're building, the Seekers, if you look at any kind of futuristic video game, there's some kind of digital or robotic assistant, that plays a part and helps manage your communication, your navigation, your resource management. That's really kind of at its top level what the Seekers do in the metaverse itself. And there's a scalable model for them to kind of build out lower generation kind of basic bots, so that this isn't like an incredibly high price point for someone to get in and have this digital assistant. But the infrastructure behind it is really interesting, because the Seekers themselves can act as nodes within the Silo network. So you can spin up a node and help contribute to this decentralized communications and payment platform, and then earn rewards by hosting the node. Now, like a lot of things that we do, I mean, the biggest thing for me as well is trying to figure out how we break out of this 10K model, because the whole 10K number is just an arbitrary number that CryptoPunk started with and everyone followed suit. And as we touched on before, like, the biggest challenge for the industry as a whole right now is how do we get towards mass adoption? How do we properly scale? And you can't do that with 10K collections. To get to Facebook's 2.8 billion users, that's 280,000 individual 10K collections, assuming every single person only owns one. Like that's never going to happen. So what we did as a kind of an experiment with Seekers, and it was really quite a novel approach, was this concept of community determined supply. So it flipped the Dutch auction model on its head, where Dutch auctions basically are an excuse for the sellers to make as much money as possible, because it means that the rich can jump in early, and those that can't afford wait, and hopefully they can get it at a certain point. What we did was a Dutch auction, but on supply. So the price was fixed unless you owned one of our ecosystem assets, and then you were kind of on the whitelist, but it wasn't a traditional whitelist. It was essentially you got a discount on the mint. But the supply started at 50,000 and immediately started dropping as soon as the mint started. Over the course of, I think, 36 hours, it would have dropped down to 10,000. And we were basically just, let's let the community determine how many seekers are going to be in existence. Now, from a kind of gamification and lore and storytelling model, this was actually part of the introduction of Goblin Town, and what we're kind of bringing in is, the dark side there, in that the goblins were stealing the seekers for parts to build their portals to summon the gods. That's a whole nother story to be told at another point. But it was incredible to see how the community reacted. And, we thought we'd maybe sell 25,000 optimistically. But within 75 minutes, we sold, I believe, just shy of 48,000 seekers. And, it's crazy to see how that was received. And actually that more than 50% of the wallets minting were from outside of our existing ecosystem. So this is one of the biggest questions that we also get, like when it comes to like South by Southwest, is, we have all these new people there that are coming to this event, but it's like to try and sell them on a $10,000 digital rabbit is pretty difficult on the spot. So to build up different entry points and different on-ramps for different people to come into the space, to dip their toe, to experiment, to grow, and to experience the community and this incredible immersion is really important. And I think seekers, they definitely helped sort of pave the way down there. And I really hope that we start to see other people adopt that kind of community determined supply model.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I'm excited for the arrival of Goblin Town, the mycelial network, the burrows, everything. It's all like we're building a motion capture volume here, so I can pilot a fluff in real time in a stupid lycra suit. My Instagram's going to blow up. Yow.
Amazing.
Arlo, to conclude, what are you excited about? What gets you up at 2 a.m. to have a chat with some English bloke?
The list is just endless, right? We have so many events coming up. We've got 2 art shows with Tyler Shields where we're going to be featuring NFTs, right, in the gallery walls, both digitally and framed. And, for us, because we just had our mint a month ago. So our roadmap things are happening right now. And we're also, to bring it full circle, since you started with the Action Sports intro, we are sponsoring the biggest skating event in the US. It's called Blading Cup in Santa Ana, California. It's put on by Them Skates. So we've signed on as a presenting sponsor of the Blading Cup, and that's going to happen at the end of this month. So we've got 2 gallery shows. We've got the Blading Cup, just a lot of exciting like IRL events. And for all of it, we're creating, merch and the prints and the stickers and all this stuff. So that's, for most of my life, that's what I've been doing, is branding, marketing, merchandising. And so now that we're finally getting to do all of that and bring it to market with drug receipts, that's what keeps me going.
Fantastic. Alex, what about you? It's like, how long have I got? Name one of the exciting things coming up for Non-Fungible Labs.
The token launch is going to be exciting. I think for a lot of people, Blufflets, which is our breeding model, it's going to really take people by surprise, just the level of complexity that we've gone into it, and looking at it from a very biological standpoint. And this is like
sounds naughty.
And genetics. But to also like go back to my point about allowing kind of easier kind of entry points to the ecosystem as well, to have a kind of far more scalable model that you can expand upon and bring in lots of different creative collaborations, while it all ties back to this wider world and gamification that we're building. That's just one of the many things that I'm excited about.
You said token launch. Which token are you referring to? Is this the Asto?
No, Asto launched last week, or the week before. They had the discovery auction closed last week. That's Altered State Machine. No, we are launching our own token mycelium for our wider ecosystem this quarter. I think I can say confidently.
You heard it here, kids. When drop. Get your fluffs ready. Get that alpha. Awesome. While I've got you here, what do you think of this news that Coinbase is doing like an interactive movie with apes? What did you make of that?
I hope they started on it a while ago, because they're apparently premiering the first part at NFT NYC, and 2 months to produce anything good is very, very tight. I like it. I mean, it's really cool for the industry, and it'll be interesting to know how they deal with using assets from the ecosystem, in terms of, if I put my ape up, for example, not that I have one anymore, RIP, but if I put that up, I sold 3 for less than an ETH. I won't get it.
You're an idiot.
But
gonna die broke and alone. Oh no, you're not.
Exactly.
Wait, what?
I've got my digital rabbits. I'm fine. To understand how they work with the community submissions and like monetizing and feeding back to the ecosystem, that will be the biggest thing for me. Because if this is just them kind of promoting themselves and potentially making themselves more money, that's fun. But
no, I can answer that for you already. There's a terms and conditions sheet. This is Coinbase.
Okay.
This is Coinbase, everyone. This is this. Yeah, you don't get shit. You get the glory of being in the film, and that's it. No, there's nothing good for the owner here except just, oh, I did a thing for the community. Wonderful. But there is.
But
this
it does elevate the visibility of the brand, right?
100%, 100%. And whether you like apes or not, they have become the vanguard of a thing which has indelibly imprinted itself on pop culture, and that opens the door for other more subversive things to get through, like yourselves. And I think, if people are turned off by the overly corporate, let's be honest, like it has been co-opted by like a certain type of elite and certain type of corporate stink, and like there are alternatives, and all we need to do is just show people that you can have that, but you can also have this.
I think if as long as the crux of it remains co-creation and decentralization of content, then I'm all for it. But if suddenly Yuga Labs are buying up every single NFT collection and want to own the metaverse, then I'll pass.
It's go back and watch The Social Network. See how Facebook evolved. It's the same. The same thing has happened, and is happening.
Everyone sets out with good intentions.
Yeah, 100%. And like as soon as you start hiring lawyers, you're in trouble, because you're ring fencing and protecting
some lawyers. So.
No, but you there's a dance you have to make. But at the moment you are in that space where you're hiring lawyers and you are self-censoring and you're protecting stuff, inherently that's what happens. And I don't blame anybody for that. But the thing I love about this space is the yes culture, is the ability to go and self-express and go and find like-minded individuals and just get shit done. Like that's still possible and still alive and well and exciting. And I can see why Arlo is excited to be bringing back those old receipts and drawing stuff for himself. I believe it. Well, listen, gents, thank you so much for joining me. This was a real honest to goodness pleasure. I feel like a little kid again. And I've got like posters up on my wall again. Thank you, Arlo, for taking the time so early in the morning. And thank you, Alex, for joining us from the other side of the world, as it is. I hope to speak to you guys very soon. All the best.